Hello there. Well, today I'm going to make some bone broth. I must admit, for years I was very skeptical about bone broth. My wife used to make it all the time, and to me it just looked like a watery soup that had no flavour, and so I never drank it. I just let her have her bone broth. But that was until I started the carnivore diet, and I began to hear everywhere just how good the bone broth is on a carnivore diet. So today I've decided to make some bone broth and let you watch me on my very first go at making bone broth. Today I am specifically speaking about carnivore bone broth, and it's important that we say up front that carnivore bone broth is different in that it contains no vegetables or any plant matter at all, including herbs and spices that some people put in. What we want to put in basically is just meat. I think one of the best things about bone broth on the carnivore diet is when it's used in those first couple of weeks in what we call the transition period. It is in those first couple of weeks that most people run into difficulties on the carnivore diet. Two things are very common in those first couple of weeks. The first is digestive problems. You either get constipation or diarrhea. In my case, it was constipation and I got it bad. The other problem you often experience, particularly in the first couple of weeks, is just like a chronic fatigue, and I certainly had that also. But bone broth is a wonderful source of electrolytes. You've probably heard of electrolytes as a drink that people mix up with a powder. But bone broth in itself is a powerful electrolyte. That's because it contains the same ingredients as those drinks I mentioned. It contains sodium and potassium and magnesium. Now, these are three vital minerals on a carnivore diet. The other thing that bone broth contains is amino acids, particularly an amino acid called glycine, if I've got that correct. Now, glycine, I've done some reading up on this in the carnivore doctors. They tell us that glycine really helps people with sleep. If you're having trouble sleeping at night or waking up during the night, then bone broth before bed could be just the key that you need because it does help with sleep. The other thing that doctors have told us is that it does contribute towards providing a protection against cancer. So that's pretty big in itself. Bone broth also helps with the immunity system, and it is also said to be helpful in dealing with skin conditions. So that's just a bit of a thumbnail sketch of some of the benefits of why we think bone broth is so good, particularly on the carnivore diet. But how do we make it? Well, I want to tell you, friends, this is so easy that even I can do it. My wife's out today, so I'm going to get this bone broth underway, and she will be surprised when she gets home at how well I've done. Well, I hope so anyway. So we start off with these bones. Now, I've got just beef bones here. You could use lamb bones, or people even use fish bones or chicken. You could use a chicken carcass. There's many different ways you could go, but for me, being carnivore and because I like beef, I've stuck with the beef bones. So I went to our gourmet butcher that you might have seen in another video, and I asked him for some beef bones. Now, I know that his meat is entirely grass-fed and grass-finished, so these would be good bones. Is there such a thing as good bones? Well, maybe. But anyway, I've got them here and I've put them in a roasting tray. Now, what I'm going to do first up is I'm going to roast these bones for 20 minutes. Now, this is optional, of course, but all it does is to brown the bones a little bit, and some people say it helps add extra flavour. So it's only 20 minutes, it's just a push of a button, so I think even I can manage that. So I'm going to roast these bones. So over here is our brand new Ninja air fryer, griller, oven, whatever you like to call it. But this thing, we've only had it a few days, and I got to tell you, it is the ultimate carnivore cooking machine. If I switch it on here, you'll see here on the labels that it can do air fry, it will roast, it will grill, it will bake, it will reheat, it will dehydrate. And they also have a function on it where you can If you're cooking a steak, for instance, you can cook the steak to your preset liking. So if you like your steak medium, you simply set it to medium, and it will cook your steak perfectly to medium. It's quite foolproof, which is good for people like me. But anyway, today I'm roasting the bones for the bone broth. So I'm going to open the lid, and here I've got my bones, and I'm simply going to place them into the oven like that, and I close the lid. And so I come down here, I want to roast them, so I press the roast button. It's automatically set the temperature to 180 degrees, and then I simply press start. And that's all there is to it. So I've got our bones out of the oven on the bench. They're still a little bit hot, they're not too bad. So I'm going to simply place these bones into the old-fashioned slow cooker. I'm sure you've got one of those at home somewhere. They almost fit. There we go. So all I'm going to do now is to add enough water into the pot. We just want to cover the bones. So that's just about done that. And I'm also going to add half a cup of apple cider vinegar. Now this is quite optional, depending on your taste and whether or not you think you can do that on your carnivore diet. I have no problem with it. And what the apple cider vinegar does is that it just gives it that acidic edge, which helps break down the bones. Now all I'm going to do is to add some salt. I've got some really good Redmond salt here. Going to give a very generous addition of the salt, and we're all set. I'll put the lid on there, and we're going to set this on to low. Now that's just going to sit there simmering for as long as you want to leave it. How long people leave it in varies considerably. I usually leave it in about 48 hours. Some people go right up to about 72 hours. I think the idea is that the longer you leave it, the greater the flavour, so there might be something in that. Now your only job while it is simmering is to make sure that the water is covering the bones. So you need to check it every now and then and make sure the water is up over the top of the bones, and if it's gone down a little bit, just add a little bit more water. That's the only job. And then after the allotted time is up, all you do is simply to take the bones out and discard those, and then put your beautiful broth into a jug in the fridge, and you can keep it there. I think you can also freeze it if you wanted to do that, but it doesn't make a huge amount, so I don't think it's worth freezing. I've never tried that, but some people do. Well, after all that exhaustive cooking, I've poured myself a little bit of bone broth from one Joe made last week, and I'm going to sit back and enjoy a bone broth on the veranda here. If you're still working out beverages on the carnivore diet and wanting to know about the pros and cons of coffee, I did a video on that not long back, and I will leave a link to it above. But in the meantime, thank you for watching. I will see you on the next video, and until then, keep telling your story.